Wow, a big charge from Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan from today's GOP hearing in the House on the origins of the pandemic. With us now, straight from that hearing, is Tennessee Congressman Mark Green and Iowa Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks, both members of the House Select Subcommittee on the Pandemic. First to you, Congresswoman Meeks. So we heard, correct us if we're wrong, that China threatened scientists. They said, you got to keep silent about what you know about our virus research, or else if you don't, you're going to be labeled as enemies of China and cut off from collaborations and funding. What happened here?
Well, certainly they threatened scientists in China. So we know that they threatened scientists in China. We know that there was suppression of information. We know that they took down reports from Chinese scientists that in all likelihood that the virus, the SARS-CoV-2, had emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that was suppressed. That article was taken offline, and then we also know they took their databases offline. So I think the other testimony about how particular scientists or doctors felt about their interactions with China, there would be repercussions if they did not, in fact, suppress or dampen any knowledge that the virus may have emanated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And I think the science, and especially what we heard today, pretty much indicates that this virus emerged from the laboratory, whether it was a virus that was captured and brought to the lab to work on and to amplify through gain-of-function research, or if it was man-made, that we don't know.
Got it. You know, it was a really interesting hearing. Congressman Green, and I'm going to ask Congresswoman Meeks the same thing. What was the most explosive thing that came out? Because we saw that China has been making a desperate push to get a hold of U.S. virus technology. What was the most explosive thing that you heard today?
I think there were two things, Liz, and of course, as always, thanks for having us on the show. Two things really stood out to me. Just the genetic manipulation that's evident in the genome of the virus. Very clear from these scientists that they believe that, there's some genetic manipulation present. It could not have come. Actually, one of the scientists said the probability that it came from a wet market was the same probability that it would take to flip a nickel 65 times in a row and always come out as a heads. So it clearly it did not come from the market. It came from the lab. That probably is one of the biggest. And then, the other is just the failure of the Democrats to show up, and this notion that even in the scientific community, there might be some form of bias just because it's Donald Trump. I mean, they couldn't afford to allow other scientists to come to conclusions that would support the president. And these scientists clearly articulated what I would call just their version of Trump derangement syndrome, impacting the results of studies. That's shocking in the scientific community.
Yeah, we hear you. Congressman Miller Meeks, in your opinion, what was the most concerning, disturbing thing today? We heard that the U.S. has given DNA of U.S. citizens to China. What can China do with that?
That was actually the most concerning thing that I heard today, was that, DNA from Americans going overseas to China, and that China is working on, decoding this DNA and then doing research to be ethnocentric. So that is extraordinarily problematic, and they're not doing this with Chinese individuals. They're doing this with American DNA. So we certainly may need to do some things legislatively to halt that practice, but we should not be sending American DNA to China if in fact they are using this for a potential bioweapon that could isolate certain segments of the population. And one of the questions I had was,
this is terrifying.
It's terrifying, was that the virus affected elderly people. Do you think there was manipulation in that regard? So I think it's very concerning. And then the other thing is that, we had our colleagues, Democrat colleagues, did not show up for this hearing. This is not a partisan issue. It is not an American issue. This is a global issue. This has implications, how we responded to the pandemic. It would have been similar, but it would have been more timely. There would have been less complacency, more urgency. So how we respond to the next the next national emergency or a pandemic, how we prepare for that. How do international bodies hold China accountable, whether it's publications, whether it's lab safety protocols, whether it's the type of research done in these laboratories. Those are important questions that the entire world needs answered and needs to hold China accountable.
We got to get to this. Okay, the question for Americans keep asking, who is doing the oversight of sharing this gain-of-function technology with China? when China has been accused of running unsafe labs since the 70s. Around the world, there have been dozens of lab leaks, lab workers getting sick. You know, the H1N1 virus, Dr. McCary told us, escaped from a lab in China in 1977. Let's listen to Dr. Peter Daszak. He's an ally of Dr. Fauci. He is boasting about how, yes, they were successful in creating a super virus inside the Wuhan lab. Watch this.
You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells. And each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus could really become pathogenic in people. So you narrow down the field, you reduce the cost, and you end up with a small number of viruses that really do look like killers. You can manipulate them in the lab pretty easily. So you can get the sequence, you can build the protein, and we work with Ralph Barrick at UNC to do this. Insert it into a backbone of another virus, right, and do some work in the labs.
He's calling them, quote, killer viruses. Who is overseeing this in the U.S.? Dr. Fauci didn't testify. Again, Congresswoman Miller Meeks just talked about, Congressman Green, that they are using American DNA in order to do ethnic targeting of viruses and possibly, maybe gender targeting. Who knows? Senior citizen targeting. Who knows?
Yeah,
this is not tinfoil hat stuff. This is serious stuff. Go ahead, Congressman.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that I entered into testimony today was China's actual declaration to the Biological Warfare Convention, where they said in 2011 that they could manipulate the genome of a virus to attack a specific race of people. So if we provide our DNA to the Chinese, they can actually target specific segments of our population. It is insane that we would continue to transfer our biotech to China.
Exactly, and I think it's important that you're covering this, and this will get out to the public. And I think it also shows us the hubris and the arrogance of scientists who think that they can manipulate this and that they'll be able to contain it, which, as we've seen, they were not able to contain this.
Got it. Congressman Green, Congresswoman Miller Meeks, thank you so much for joining us. You'll be back on with us. It's great to have you on. Thanks again.